Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, watching the stars drift past the viewing screen. The ship had been traveling through space for 3 months now, looking for new worlds and new life forms. Jake was a tall man with dark hair and tired eyes. He had been a space captain for 15 years, and he loved his job more than anything else in the universe. "Captain, we are getting close to the Kepler 442 system," said Lieutenant Amy Collins from her station. Amy was young and smart, with red hair and bright green eyes. She had joined the crew only 6 months ago, but she was already one of the best communication officers Jake had ever worked with. "Good," Jake replied. "Dr. Harper, what do we know about this system?" Dr. Lisa Harper looked up from her computer screen. She was the chief science officer, a woman in her 40s with brown hair and glasses. Lisa had studied alien life for most of her adult life, and she knew more about other worlds than almost anyone else in human space. "The system has 7 planets," Lisa said. 3 of them might have water. The 4th planet has 2 moons, and our long-range sensors picked up something strange on the smaller moon. It looks like metal structures, but they are very old." Commander Ryan Blake, the ship's tactical officer, frowned. Ryan was a big man with short black hair and scars on his hands from old battles. He had fought in the war against the Centauri pirates 5 years ago, and he did not trust anything that seemed too easy. "How old are we talking about?" Ryan asked. "Maybe 50,000 years, Lisa answered. "Maybe older. The metal is not like anything we have seen before. It does not match any known alien technology." Jake thought about this. In all his years of space travel, he had met many different alien species. Most of them were friendly. The Altarians had blue skin and loved to trade. The Vegan Council made beautiful art. The Centauri Federation had the best technology in the galaxy. But sometimes explorers found things that were better left alone. "Set course for the 4th planet," Jake decided. "We will take a look at these structures, but everyone stays alert." The Terra Nova changed direction and moved toward the planet. It was a dead world, covered in red dust and broken rocks. The smaller moon was even more lifeless, with no air and no water. But as they got closer, their sensors showed them something that made everyone stop and stare. The structures were huge. They looked like a city, but a city built by someone who thought very differently from humans. The buildings were tall and twisted, made of black metal that seemed to eat light. Strange symbols covered every surface, and the whole place felt wrong somehow. "Captain," said Dr. Kevin Ross, the ship's language expert. Kevin was a thin man with gray hair who could speak 17 different alien languages. "I'm seeing writing here, but it is not from just one species. I count at least 6 different types of symbols." "6 different species built this together?" Amy asked. "No," Kevin said slowly. "I think 6 different species left warnings about this place." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. "What kind?" "Oh, warnings?" Kevin worked at his computer for several minutes. His face got paler as he read the symbols. "The words are different in each language, but they all say the same thing. Do not enter, do not wake what sleeps, do not open the doors." "Doors to what?" Lisa asked. "I do not know," Kevin admitted. "But every single warning talks about something called the Devourers, and they all say the same thing about them. They eat souls." Ryan stood up straighter. "Captain, I think we should report this to command and let them send a full military team." But Lisa was already studying the sensor readings. "Jake, this is the discovery of a lifetime. Think about what we could learn. These structures are older than human civilization. They might hold secrets that could help all of humanity." Jake looked at the screen showing the dead moon and its twisted city. Part of him wanted to agree with Ryan and call for backup. But another part of him, the part that had made him an explorer, wanted to know what was down there. "We go down," he decided. "But we take full precautions. Ryan, I want armed security teams. Lisa, you get your best people, and nobody goes anywhere alone." 2 hours later, Jake was standing on the surface of the moon wearing a heavy spacesuit and carrying a plasma rifle. The ancient city looked even stranger up close. The buildings seemed to lean toward each other, and the symbols on the walls seemed to move when he was not looking directly at them. Lisa and her team were already setting up equipment near what looked like the main entrance. It was a massive door made of the same black metal as the buildings. More symbols covered its surface, and these ones were definitely warnings. "The door is sealed," reported Dr. Angela Foster, Lisa's assistant. Angela was a young woman with blonde hair who specialized in alien technology. "But I think I can open it. The locking mechanism is complex, but not impossible." "Do it," Jake ordered, even though every instinct told him this was a bad idea. Angela worked for 20 minutes, using human tools to unlock an alien door that had been sealed for thousands of years. When it finally opened, a sound came out that made everyone step back. It was not exactly a sound, but more like a feeling of sound. It felt like screaming, but screaming that came from somewhere far away. "The air inside is breathable," Lisa reported, checking her instruments. "But the temperature is much colder than it should be." They entered the structure with their lights cutting through the darkness. The inside was even stranger than the outside. The halls were too wide and too tall, as if built for creatures much larger than humans. The walls were covered in more symbols, and these ones seemed to glow faintly with their own light. "Captain," called Dr. Ross from up ahead, "you need to see this." Jake hurried to catch up with the language expert. Kevin was standing in front of a wall covered in symbols that were definitely different from the others. These ones were newer, maybe only a few thousand years old. "What does it say?" Jake asked. Kevin's voice was shaking. "It is a final warning. It says that the Altarians tried to destroy this place 3,000 years ago. They failed. The Centauri tried to seal it permanently 2,000 years ago. They failed too. And it says that whatever is in here, it is not dead. It is waiting. Waiting for what? For someone stupid enough to let it out?" Before Jake could respond, Lisa's voice echoed from deeper in the structure. "Captain, you need to get down here right now. We found something incredible." Jake and Kevin followed Lisa's voice through the twisting hallways. They found her in a huge circular room with a ceiling so high their lights could not reach it. In the center of the room were 12 crystal containers, each one the size of a small building. Inside each container was something that looked like pure energy, swirling and moving like liquid light. "What are they?" Jake asked. "I do not know," Lisa admitted, "but they are alive. The containers are not just holding them. They are keeping them asleep." Suddenly, Ryan's voice came through their communicators. "Captain, we have a problem. There are ships approaching. 3 of them, and they are not responding to our calls." Jake felt his heart sink. What kind of ships? Zephyrian Empire military vessels. And they are moving fast. The Zephyrians were not friends of humanity. They were a warrior race that believed in taking what they wanted by force. If they were here, it meant they had been watching human space and following human ships. "We need to leave," Jake decided. Now, but it was too late. The sound of weapons fire came from outside, and Ryan's voice was full of anger. "They are attacking the Terra Nova. We are under fire." Jake grabbed his communicator. "All teams, return to the ship immediately. We are leaving this place." But as they ran toward the exit, they heard something that made them all stop. It was the sound of the crystal containers cracking. The Zephyrian weapons fire had damaged the ancient structure, and the containers that had held the Devourers for thousands of years were finally breaking open. The swirling energy inside the containers began to move faster, and Jake realized that they had just made the biggest mistake in human history. They had found hell itself, and now someone was about to set it free. 6 months had passed since the disaster at the ancient alien prison. Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Fort Titan, looking at reports that made his stomach turn. The military base was built on New Arizona, a frontier world that had once been peaceful. Now it was one of the last safe places in this part of the galaxy. "Captain, we just lost contact with the Altarian homeworld," reported Lieutenant Amy Collins. Her red hair was now shorter, and her green eyes looked tired. The past 6 months had aged everyone who lived through them. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. The Altarians had been humanity's best friends among the stars. They were gentle people with blue skin who loved art and music. They had helped humans learn about space travel and had never asked for anything in return. How long since their last message? Jake asked.
3 days, Amy replied.
The final transmission was just screaming, then nothing. Dr. Lisa Harper entered the command center, carrying a tablet computer. She looked much older than she had 6 months ago. Her brown hair was now mostly gray, and she rarely smiled anymore.
I
Finished analyzing the data from the vegan system, Lisa said quietly. It is the same pattern as all the others. First, the people start fighting among themselves. Then they turn their own weapons on their cities. Finally, they destroy everything they built. Jake nodded. This was the 5th star system to fall in the past month. The Devourers that had escaped from the ancient prison were spreading across the galaxy like a disease. But they did not destroy worlds by themselves. Instead, they somehow got inside people's minds and made them destroy each other. Any word from the Galactic Council? Jake asked. They are meeting in emergency session, Lisa replied. But 3 of the council members are from worlds that went dark last week. I do not think they will be able to help anyone. Commander Ryan Blake walked into the room, his heavy boots making noise on the metal floor. The big man's face was grim, and his uniform was dirty from working on the base defenses. The Centauri Federation just sent us a message, Ryan said. They are pulling back all their ships to defend their home systems. They think they can build a wall of force fields to keep the Devourers out. Will that work? Amy asked. No, said Dr. Kevin Ross, entering behind Ryan, the language expert. Had been studying the ancient warnings for months. The Devourers do not attack from outside. They get inside people's minds and make them open the doors themselves. Jake thought about this. The Devourers were unlike any enemy humanity had ever faced. They could not be shot or bombed or defeated in normal battle. They were made of pure energy and could jump from one mind to another. Worse, they seemed to feed on violence and anger. The more fighting they caused, the stronger they became. Sir, Amy said, looking at her communication equipment, we are getting a transmission from Admiral Patricia Stone on Earth. The main screen lit up with the image of a stern woman in her 50s. Admiral Stone had short gray hair and cold blue eyes. She was the commander of the entire Terran Defense Force, and she had been fighting wars for 30 years. Captain Morrison, Admiral Stone said, I'm sure you have seen the reports. The galaxy is falling faster than we expected. The Devourers have infected 17 star systems in the past week alone. Yes, ma'am, Jake replied. What are your orders? We are pulling back all human forces to defend Earth and the core colonies. You are to evacuate Fort Titan and fall back to the Sol system immediately. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. Admiral, there are still millions of people in this sector. We cannot just abandon them. Captain, we cannot save people who are beyond saving. The Devourers have already reached the outer colonies. It is only a matter of time before they get to Earth. The transmission ended, leaving Jake and his team alone in the command center. Outside, they could hear the sounds of the base preparing for evacuation. Soldiers were loading supplies onto ships, and families were saying goodbye to friends they would never see again. Jake, Lisa said quietly, maybe the Admiral is right. Maybe we should run while we still can. But Jake was thinking about something else. Kevin, you said the ancient warnings talked about other species trying to stop the Devourers. What exactly did they try? Kevin pulled up his research on his tablet. The Altarians tried to destroy the prison with nuclear weapons. The Centauri tried to seal it with force fields. The vegans tried to hide it in another dimension. They all failed. But they all tried to fight the Devourers directly, Jake realized. What if that is the wrong approach? What do you mean? Ryan asked. The Devourers get stronger when people fight. They feed on violence and anger. But what if we could find a way to fight them that made them weaker instead of stronger? Lisa looked interested for the first time in weeks. You mean psychological warfare instead of physical warfare? Maybe, Jake said, or maybe something else entirely. Kevin, do the ancient warnings say anything about what the Devourers are afraid of? Kevin searched through his translations. There are some references to things that can hurt them. But most, of it is in languages that are so old I cannot read them properly. Suddenly, Amy's communication equipment started making alarm sounds. Sir, we are getting emergency transmissions from all over the sector. The Devourers have reached the mining colonies on Beta Centauri. Jake watched the reports come in. The mining colonies had 20 million people. They were tough, hard-working folks who had spent their lives digging metals and minerals out of dangerous asteroids. If anyone could resist the Devourers, it should be them. But the reports told a different story. The miners were turning on each other, using their industrial equipment as weapons. Entire asteroids were being blown apart as the people who had built them tried to destroy their own work. Captain, Ryan said, we need to make a decision. Do we follow orders and evacuate, or do we try to help those people? Jake was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Admiral Stone's orders. He thought about the millions of people who were dying across the galaxy. He thought about the Devourers growing stronger with each act of violence they caused. We stay, he decided. But we do not fight the way everyone else has been fighting. What do you mean? Lisa asked. I mean, we find a different way. The Devourers have beaten every other species in the galaxy because everyone keeps trying the same tactics. But humans are different. We think differently. Maybe we can find a solution that no one else has thought of. Ryan looked skeptical. Sir? With respect, what makes you think we can succeed where advanced civilizations like the Centauri have failed? Jake smiled grimly. Because we are not advanced, we are primitive. We are violent, we are stubborn. And sometimes the best way to fight a sophisticated enemy is with primitive tactics. Over the next few days, Jake and his team worked on a plan that would have seemed crazy to anyone else. Instead of trying to protect people from the Devourers, they would try to understand them. Instead of building walls to keep them out, they would try to find what made them weak. Lisa and her science team studied every piece of data they could find about the Devourers. They analyzed the energy patterns, the way they move from mind to mind. The types of people they seemed to prefer. As host, Kevin worked on translating more of the ancient warnings. Looking for any clue about what the Devourers feared, he found references to the darkness that devours devourers and the hunger that feeds on hunger itself. Ryan prepared the base defenses, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of weapons designed to kill, he set up equipment designed to confuse and disorient. Instead of walls to keep enemies out, he built mazes to trap them inside. Amy monitored communications from across the galaxy, listening to the final messages from dying worlds. But she also listened for patterns, for anything that might give them a clue about how to fight back. As they worked, more reports came in. The Centauri Federation had fallen despite all their technology. The Vegan Council had been consumed by madness. Even the warlike Zephyrian Empire, whose attack had accidentally freed the Devourers, had turned their weapons on themselves. Jake, Lisa said one evening as they reviewed their research, I think we might be the last free people in the galaxy. Jake looked at the star charts showing the spread of the Devourers. Red marks indicated fallen worlds, and there were hundreds of them now. Soon, the entire galaxy would be nothing but empty space and dead planets. Then we better figure out how to win, he said. Because if we fail, there will be no one left to try again. But deep in his heart, Jake was beginning to understand something that terrified him. To defeat the Devourers, humanity might have to become something even worse than they were. And he was not sure the galaxy would survive that cure. President Helen Martinez sat in the emergency meeting room deep under the Pentagon. The walls were thick concrete, and the air smelled like fear and coffee. Around the table sat the most powerful people in human space, and they all looked tired and scared. The situation is worse than we thought, said General Robert Kim, the head of military intelligence. He was a short man with dark hair and worried eyes. The Devourers have reached the outer colonies. We have maybe 6 months before they get to Earth. Admiral Patricia Stone leaned forward. The Galactic Council sent us their final message yesterday. They are begging us to run. They want humanity to take our ships and flee to another galaxy before it is too late. How many people can we save if we run? Asked Dr. Angela Foster, who had been promoted to head of alien research after the disaster. At the prison moon. Maybe 10 million, replied General Kim. We would have to leave behind 8 billion people on Earth and another 2 billion in the colonies. President Martinez looked at the faces around the table. She had been president for only 2 years, but she had already seen more horror than any leader in human history. The Devourers were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. They were smart, they were patient, and they seemed to enjoy watching civilizations destroy themselves. What about fighting them? Martinez asked. Ma'am, every other species has tried to fight them, said Dr. Carl Peterson, the head of weapons development. Carl was a thin man with glasses who had spent his life making things that could kill other things. The Centauri had weapons that could destroy planets. The Altarians had shields that could stop anything. The vegans had technology we do not even understand. None of it worked. Because they all fought the wrong war, said a new voice from the corner of the room. Everyone turned to look at Colonel Linda Hayes, the head of military strategy. Linda was a tall woman with short black hair and scars on her face from the Martian. Rebellion 15 years ago? She had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now she stood up and walked to the front of the room. The Devourers do not fight like normal enemies, Linda continued. They do not have ships or weapons or soldiers. They get inside people's minds and make them fight each other. Every time someone tries to fight them with violence, they get stronger. So what do you suggest? Asked Admiral Stone. Linda smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. We do not fight them with violence. We fight them with something worse. What could be worse than violence? Asked Dr. Peterson. Us? Linda replied. Humans, when we really try. President Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. Explain. Linda activated a holographic display that showed images from across the galaxy. Dead worlds, empty cities, the wreckage of civilizations that had torn themselves apart. The Devourers feed on negative emotions, Linda said. Fear, anger, hatred, despair. They turn these feelings into weapons that people use against each other. But there is one thing they have never encountered before. What is that? Asked General Kim. Humans who are angry on purpose. Humans who choose to be monsters. Humans who can control their darkness instead of being controlled by it. The room was silent for a long moment. President Martinez thought about what Linda was suggesting. It was horrible, but it might be the only way to save humanity. You are talking about Protocol Omega, Martinez said quietly. Linda nodded. Yes, ma'am. The war doctrine that was too extreme to ever use. The plan we made for fighting an enemy so terrible that normal rules do not apply. Protocol Omega had been developed in secret 5 years ago. It was a set of military and scientific projects that were considered too dangerous, too unethical, and too horrible to ever implement. The idea was to create weapons and tactics that were so terrible that they would make any enemy surrender rather than face them. If we activate Protocol Omega, said Admiral Stone, we will become the thing that other species have nightmares about. Good, Linda replied. Because right now the Devourers are having nightmares about nothing. It is time to give them something to fear. President Martinez looked around the table at the faces of her advisors. They all knew what she was thinking. They all knew what choice she had to make. Dr. Peterson, she said, tell me about the nightmare weapons. Dr. Peterson adjusted his glasses nervously. The nightmare weapons are not designed to kill people. They are designed to make people wish they were dead. We have sonic weapons that cause permanent madness. We have viral programs that attack the part of the brain that controls fear. We have psychological weapons that can make someone afraid of their own shadow. And the memory bombs? Asked General Kim. Those are worse, Peterson admitted. They do not just destroy matter, they destroy the memory of matter. If we use a memory bomb on a city, not only will the city be gone, but no one will remember it ever existed. What about the void protocols? Asked Admiral Stone. Dr. Angela Foster answered this time. The void protocols are our most extreme option. We would create artificial beings that exist only to hunt and destroy other artificial beings. They would be programmed with human hatred and human cruelty, but without human mercy or human limits. President. Martinez felt sick, but she also felt something else. For the first time in months, she felt hope. These weapons were terrible, but they might be the only things that could save humanity. There is one more thing, said Linda. We will need volunteers. Soldiers who are willing to undergo psychological conditioning. People who can become monsters in battle but return to being human afterward. That is impossible, said General. Kim, no one can control that kind of transformation. We can, Linda replied. I have been working with the Psychological Warfare Division. We can use drugs, conditioning, and neural implants to create soldiers who are completely ruthless in combat but completely normal in peace. We call them Banshee troops. How many people would volunteer for something like that? Asked Admiral Stone. More than you think, Linda said. I already have a list of candidates. People who have lost everything to the Devourers. People who want revenge more than they want to stay human. President Martinez stood up. Everyone in. The room looked at her, waiting for her decision. She thought about the billions of people who were counting on her. She thought about the children who would never grow up if humanity failed. She thought about the Devourers spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. I am activating Protocol Omega, she said. God help us all. The next few weeks were the busiest in human history. Research facilities across human space began working on projects that had been locked away in secret vaults. Scientists who had been told their ideas were too dangerous were suddenly given unlimited resources and told to work as fast as possible. Dr. Peterson and his team began building the nightmare weapons. They created devices that could cause fear, so intense that even the Devourers would be affected. They built machines that could make people forget how to feel happiness or hope. Dr. Foster began work on the artificial beings that would hunt the Devourers. These creatures would be made of pure hatred and programmed with every cruel thought humanity had ever had. They would be immune to the Devourers' mental attacks because they would have no minds to attack, only endless hunger for revenge. Colonel Hayes began training the first Banshee troops. The volunteers went through months of psychological conditioning, learning to turn their humanity on and off like a switch. They were taught to feel no pity, no fear, and no mercy when they were. In battle mode, Admiral Stone began building a new type of warship. These vessels would be crewed by the Banshee troops and armed with the nightmare weapons. They would be painted black and given names like Torment, Despair, and Oblivion. But the most important work was being done by a team of scientists led by Dr. Lisa Harper. She had been brought to Earth from Fort Titan to work on the most secret project of all. They were trying to create a weapon that could fight the Devourers on their own level, something that could get inside their energy forms and destroy them from within. We are playing with forces we do not understand, Lisa warned during one of the project meetings. If we make a mistake, we could destroy ourselves along with the Devourers. Then we better not make any mistakes, replied Dr. Peterson. Because if we fail, there will be no one left to learn from our errors. As the weeks passed, reports continued to come in from across the galaxy. More worlds had fallen to the Devourers. More civilizations had destroyed themselves. The circle of darkness was getting closer to Earth with each passing day. But something else was happening too. The Devourers were starting to move more carefully. They seemed to sense that something had changed in human space. They could feel the darkness growing, and for the first time in thousands of years, they were beginning to feel something they had never felt before. They were beginning to feel afraid. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Banshee. The vessel was nothing like the Terra Nova he had once commanded. The walls were black metal, the lights were dim and red, and the air itself seemed to carry the smell of anger and fear. The ship had been built for one purpose, to hunt the Devourers and destroy them completely. Admiral, we are approaching Kepler Prime, said Commander Tony Rodriguez, his new tactical officer. Tony was one of the first Banshee Troops, a man who had volunteered to have his mind altered so he could become a perfect killer when needed. His eyes were cold and empty, but Jake knew that somewhere inside Tony was still human. "What do we know about the situation down there?" Jake asked. Dr. Lisa Harper, now serving as the fleet's science advisor, checked her instruments. "The planet had 12 million people before the Devourers arrived. Our sensors show about 8 million life signs remaining, but they are all fighting each other. The entire surface is covered in fires and explosions." Jake nodded grimly. This was their first real test. For 6 months, humanity had been preparing for this moment. They had built weapons that should not exist and trained soldiers to be monsters. Now it was time to see if their plan would work. "Deploy the nightmare drones," Jake ordered. From the belly of the Banshee, dozens of small robotic ships flew toward the planet. These drones carried Dr. Peterson's most terrible creation, sonic weapons that could drive the Devourers out of human minds by making those minds too painful to inhabit. The drones spread across the planet's surface and began their work. The sound they made could not be heard by human ears, but it could be felt. It was the sound of pure human rage, concentrated and focused into a weapon. The Devourers, who fed on negative emotions, suddenly found themselves choking on more darkness than they could handle. "It is working," Lisa reported, watching her screens in amazement. "The Devourers are being forced out of their hosts. They are trying to escape the planet. Do not let them," Jake ordered. "Begin the hunt protocol." Commander Rodriguez activated the ship's artificial intelligence. The AI was called Fury, and it had been programmed with every cruel thought and angry memory that humanity had ever recorded. When Fury spoke, its voice sounded like grinding metal and broken glass. "Targets identified," Fury announced. "Devourers attempting to flee. Beginning pursuit." The Banshee moved through space like a predator stalking prey. Its weapons were not designed to kill quickly. They were designed to cause suffering. When the ship's energy beams hit the fleeing Devourers, the ancient entities screamed in frequencies that hurt to hear. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Ben Parker from the communications station, "we are getting a transmission from the Devourers. They want to talk." Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Put them through." The main screen flickered, and an image appeared. It was hard to look at directly because it kept changing shape and color. This was what a Devourer looked like when it was not hiding inside someone's mind. "Human creatures," the Devourer said in a voice like breaking stone, "we offer you a bargain. Leave this world and we will not spread to your colonies." "No," Jake replied simply. "You do not understand," the Devourer continued. "We are ancient. We have consumed 1,000 civilizations. You cannot defeat us. Watch us," Jake said, and cut the transmission. The battle for Kepler Prime lasted 3 days. The human forces used tactics that no other species had ever imagined. Instead of trying to protect the people on the planet, they used the people as bait. They let the Devourers possess more humans, then used psychological weapons to make those possessed minds so full of controlled rage that the Devourers could not handle them. Commander Rodriguez led boarding parties onto Devourer-controlled space stations. His Banshee troops moved through the corridors like machines, killing everything they found without emotion or hesitation. When the Devourers tried to possess them, they found minds that had been trained to feel only anger and the desire to destroy. "This is impossible," one captured Devourer said as Dr. Foster's team prepared to study it. "Your people should be easy to control. Humans are full of fear and anger and hatred." "You are right," Dr. Foster replied as she activated the containment field, "but you made one mistake. You assumed we could not control those feelings ourselves." The Devourer writhed in its energy prison. "What are you going to do to me?" "We are going to learn everything about you," Foster said calmly. "We are going to study your energy patterns, your feeding habits, and your weaknesses. And then we are going to use that knowledge to hunt down every single one of your kind." Word of the victory at Kepler Prime spread across the galaxy. The few remaining free worlds sent messages of hope and amazement. For the first time since the Devourers had been released, someone had fought them and won, but the victory came with a price. The Banshee troops who had fought on the space stations returned to the ship changed. Even with their psychological conditioning, the experience of becoming perfect killers had left marks on their souls. "Admiral," Dr. Lisa Harper said privately, "I am worried about the troops. The psychological profiles show that they are having trouble switching back to their normal personalities." Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about what they had become. How bad is it? Some of them cannot remember how to feel happiness. Others have nightmares about the things they did during the battle. A few are asking to be kept in combat mode permanently because they say it hurts less than being human. Jake felt a cold weight in his stomach. "What do you recommend?" "I think we need to rotate the troops more often. And we need to find volunteers who are psychologically stronger. The current conditioning is not enough." Over the next few months, the human fleet grew larger and more terrible. New ships were built with names like Torment, Despair, and Oblivion. Each vessel carried weapons that could destroy not just matter, but the very idea of matter. They had bombs that could erase memories and devices that could make people forget how to feel love. Admiral Jake Morrison found himself in command of a fleet that other species called the Dark Armada. His ships moved from world to world, hunting down the Devourers and freeing the surviving populations. But each victory made humanity a little less human. The Battle of Vega Station was the turning point. The station had been one of the largest trading posts in the galaxy before the Devourers took it over. Now it was a twisted maze of metal and madness, with millions of possessed beings wandering its corridors. Commander Rodriguez led the assault personally. His Banshee troops moved through the station like ghosts, appearing suddenly to kill Devour-possessed victims and then disappearing into the shadows. They used weapons that could freeze fear itself and devices that could make courage into a physical poison. "The Devourers are retreating," reported Captain Sarah Wells, commander of the ship Nightmare. "They are abandoning their hosts and trying to escape into deep space." "Follow them," Jake ordered. "Use the Void Hunters." The Void Hunters were Dr. Foster's most terrible creation. They were artificial beings made of pure human hatred, programmed to track and destroy anything that resembled a devourer. They had no bodies, only energy and the desire to cause pain. The Void Hunters chased the fleeing Devourers through space, catching them one by one and tearing them apart with weapons made of concentrated human cruelty. The ancient entities who had once been the most feared things in the galaxy found themselves running in terror from creatures that were somehow even worse than they were. "Admiral," called Dr. Foster from her laboratory ship, the Pandora, "we have captured 3 more Devourers for study. But there is something strange about them." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "They are begging us to kill them quickly. They say that being studied by humans is worse than death." Jake thought about this. The Devourers had once been so confident, so sure of their power. Now they were afraid of humanity. But Jake wondered if maybe they should be afraid of what humanity was becoming. "Sir," Lieutenant Parker called from communications, "we are getting messages from the surviving worlds. They want to surrender to us." "Surrender to us?" Jake asked. "We are here to help them." "Yes, sir, but they say they would rather surrender to us than risk making us angry." "They have heard stories about what we do to our enemies." Jake looked around the bridge of his ship. His crew was efficient and deadly, but they rarely smiled anymore. They rarely talked about anything except the war. They had become the perfect weapons for fighting the Devourers, but in doing so they had stopped being the people they used to be. "Admiral," Dr. Harper said quietly, "I think we are winning. The Devourers are retreating to the edge of the galaxy. But I have to ask, what happens when the war is over? What happens to us when there are no more monsters to fight?" Jake did not have an answer. He looked out at the stars and wondered if humanity would ever be able to go back to being the peaceful explorers they had once been, or if they had changed so much that the galaxy would always fear them. The war was almost over. But Jake was beginning to think that the real battle would start when the fighting stopped. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship Nemesis, looking at the dark world below. This was the last stronghold of the Devourers, a twisted planet at the edge of the galaxy where the ancient entities had gathered for their final stand. 18 months of brutal warfare had led to this moment. "Admiral, all ships are in position," reported Commander Tony Rodriguez. The tactical officer's face was pale and thin. The constant psychological conditioning had taken its toll on him, and Jake wondered if Tony would ever be able to return to a normal life. "What is the status of the binding weapon?" Jake asked. Dr. Lisa Harper checked her instruments from her station on the science ship Pandora. "The device is ready, Admiral. Dr. Foster's team has confirmed that it will trap any surviving Devourers in a permanent energy prison. They will not be able to escape or reproduce." Jake nodded. The binding weapon was humanity's final solution to the Devourer problem. It was a device that could lock the energy beings into a single location forever. But there was a choice to be made about where that location would be. "Sir," called Lieutenant Ben Parker from Communications, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the swirling energy form of what appeared to be the leader of the remaining Devourers. The entity looked smaller than before, less confident. The long war had weakened them greatly. "Human Admiral," the Devourer said in a voice like dying wind, "we offer you terms." "I am listening," Jake replied. "We will leave this galaxy forever. We will travel to the dark spaces between galaxies and never return. In exchange, you will stop hunting us." Jake was quiet for a moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited for his answer. These were people who had been changed by months of war, who had become weapons against an enemy that fed on violence itself. "Why should I trust you?" Jake asked. "Because you have already won," the Devourer replied. "We cannot fight you anymore. Your people have become something we do not understand. We feed on fear and anger and hatred, but your warriors use these emotions as tools. They control their darkness instead of being controlled by it. We have never encountered anything like this." Jake thought about the choice before him. He could let the Devourers flee to the space between galaxies, where they might recover and someday return. Or he could use the binding weapon to trap them forever. But there was a third option. "Dr. Harper," Jake said quietly, "set the coordinates for the binding weapon." "Where should I target, Admiral?" Lisa asked. Jake looked at the star charts showing human space. He thought about Earth, about the colonies, about all the people who would live in fear if they knew the Devourers might someday return. "Set the coordinates for Luna Base on the dark side of Earth's moon." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what Jake was choosing. Instead of letting the Devourers escape or destroying them completely, he was bringing them home. He was making them humanity's responsibility forever. "Admiral," Dr. Lisa Harper said carefully, "are you sure about this? We would be keeping our greatest enemies right next to our home world." "Yes," Jake replied. "But we would also be keeping them where we can study them, where we can learn from them, and where we can make sure they never escape." Commander Rodriguez looked puzzled. "Sir, why not just destroy them completely?" Jake turned to face his bridge crew. These people had followed him through the darkest war in galactic history. They deserved an honest answer. Because if we destroy them, we learn nothing. If we let them escape, they might return stronger. But if we keep them close, we can understand them. And maybe, someday, we can use that understanding to make sure this never happens again. The Devourer on the screen seemed to understand what Jake was choosing. "You would make us your prisoners forever?" "I would make you our responsibility," Jake corrected. "You will be contained, studied, and watched. But you will also be alive. Why would you show us mercy after what we have done?" Jake smiled grimly. "This is not mercy. This is something much worse. We are going to keep you alive so we can learn everything about you. We are going to study your fears, your weaknesses, and your deepest secrets. And if any others like you ever threaten this galaxy again, we will be ready." The transmission ended. Jake gave the order to activate the binding weapon. The device fired a beam of pure energy that swept across the planet's surface. gathering up every devourer and compressing them into a small sphere of contained darkness. The sphere was transported to Luna Base, where it was placed in a specially constructed facility. The prison was built deep under the moon's surface, surrounded by the most advanced monitoring equipment humanity could create. The surviving devourers found themselves trapped in a place where they would be watched by humans every moment of every day. But the war's end brought new problems. The galaxy was free, but the cost had been enormous. Humanity had revealed itself to be capable of horrors that made even cosmic terrors flee in fear. The other surviving species began to treat humans very differently. 5 years later, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of a new ship, the Explorer, which was much smaller and more peaceful than the Nemesis. He had been returned to his original rank of captain and given command of a scientific vessel. The war was over, and humanity was trying to return to being explorers instead of monsters. "Captain, we are approaching the Rigel system," reported Lieutenant Amy Collins, who had survived the war but rarely smiled anymore. "Long-range sensors show signs of a previously unknown civilization." "Peaceful contact protocols," Jake ordered. "We are here to explore and learn, not to conquer." As they approached the new world, they received a transmission from the planet's surface. The aliens were clearly nervous about making contact with humans. "Unknown vessel, please identify yourself," came the transmission. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration ship Explorer. We come in peace." There was a long pause before the response came. "Are you human?" "Yes, we are human." Another pause, even longer this time. Then, "We surrender." Jake felt his heart sink. This was not the first time this had happened. Word of humanity's war against the Devourers had spread across the galaxy, and now every species they encountered was terrified of them. "You do not need to surrender," Jake said gently. "We are explorers, not conquerors. We only want to learn about your people and share knowledge." "Please do not be angry with us," came the frightened reply. "We will give you whatever you want. Just please do not use your dark weapons on our world." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. This was the price of victory. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but in doing so, they had become the thing that other species had nightmares about. Later that day, Jake met with Dr. Lisa Harper in the ship's science lab. Lisa had aged greatly during the war, and her hair was now completely gray. She spent most of her time studying reports from Luna Base, where the imprisoned Devourers were slowly being understood. "How are they?" Jake asked. "Broken," Lisa replied. "The constant observation by humans has made them almost catatonic. They barely respond to stimuli anymore. I think they would prefer to be dead." "And what have we learned from them?" "Everything. How they reproduce, how they spread, how they think. If anything like them ever appears again, we will be ready." Lisa paused. "But Jake, I have to ask, what have we become?" Jake looked out at the stars through the lab's window. Somewhere out there, species were telling stories about the humans who had defeated the Devourers. But these were not stories of heroic rescue. They were ghost stories, tales told to frighten children about the monsters that lived among the stars. "We became what we needed to become," Jake said finally. "We saved the galaxy, but at what cost?" Lisa asked. "Every species in the galaxy is afraid of us now. When we arrive at a new world, they assume we are there to conquer them. When we offer friendship, they think we are planning to betray them later. We won the war, but we lost something more important." Jake nodded. "We lost our innocence. And maybe we lost the trust of everyone else in the galaxy. So what do we do now?" Lisa asked. Jake thought about this for a long time. Finally, he said, "We live with what we have become. We try to be better than our reputation. And we make sure that the galaxy never needs monsters like us again." In the years that followed, humanity worked hard to rebuild their relationships with other species. They shared technology, offered aid to struggling worlds, and tried to prove that they could be friends instead of conquerors. But everyone remembered the war. Everyone knew that somewhere on Earth's moon, ancient horrors sat in prison, being studied by the people who had proven themselves to be even more terrible. And everyone understood that if the galaxy ever faced A threat like the Devourers again, humanity would be ready to become monsters once more? Jake Morrison lived to be an old man, always exploring, always trying to show the galaxy that humans could be more than the weapons they had become. But he never forgot the lesson of the war. Sometimes, to protect the innocent, someone has to be willing to become the villain. And sometimes, the galaxy needs its monsters to keep the real darkness at bay.